and Facebook Live. So I'm just watching it load. Just one moment. Okay, and we are live. Hello, Facebook Live. Hello, Zoom. We are here. And so we are now in the time between Passover and Shavuot, between Pesach and Shavuos. As we know, there are 7 weeks, and there's a special mitzvah that takes place during this time, and it's called the counting of the Omer. And so we actually count 7 weeks, and each week, of course, is comprised of 7 days. So we end up with a count of 7 times 7, 49 days, the 7 weeks counting the Omer. But what exactly are we counting? So the Torah just says to count. The Torah doesn't give us much information as to what we are counting about. The commentaries explain that what we're actually doing is counting down the days to Shavuot, which is the anniversary of when we received the Torah on Mount Sinai over 3,000 years ago. And so the Kabbalists explain that what we're really doing is going through a metamorphosis and experience a transformation. Because when it comes to Passover, the sacrifice that was brought on Passover there were 2 sacrifices. One was the barley, the famous Paschal sacrifice, right? That was an animal, a sheep. But there was also a vegetarian option, if you will, and that was barley. There was a special sacrifice called the Korban Omer that was brought on Pesach, and it was a special portion of barley, and that was offered in the temple on Passover. And then when it comes to Shavuot, there was another grain sacrifice, but it was actually a bread made out of wheat. So we have the barley on Passover and the wheat on Shavuot. So the Kabbalists explain that traditionally barley was a grain that was fed to the animals, whereas wheat is a grain that's reserved for humans. And so the idea is we are trying to go on a journey from transforming ourselves from being like an animal, to becoming more of a human being. And so if we're honest with ourselves, we know that we all have animalistic tendencies in ways in which we're very similar to animals. And then, of course, we have the higher self. We have the higher self, our upper self, where we are like humans, the most idealistic self, the intellectual self, etc. So we're actually going on a journey, starting out like an animal, which is instinctive, emotional outburst, self-centered, etc., and just thinking about the here and now, to becoming elevated to become human-like. If you don't like being compared to animals, we have another metaphor. Passover is considered the birthday of the Jewish people. It's known as Leidat Am Yisrael, the birthday of the Jewish people, as a people collectively, but also as individuals. And so just like a child is born, a baby is born, when a baby starts out, they may be innocent, but they're also clueless. They don't know what's going on. They very self-centered, right? If they don't get their food on time, or their sleep, or you don't change the diaper, then that's the bedlam, right? So a baby, even a child, very self-centered, and that's the way God made them. That's fine, but that's just the reality. An adult, we hope by the time a person becomes an adult, they've matured to be able to delay gratification, to be able to appreciate the other, to have a relationship, to be mature, to realize not every feeling that I have should be expressed, etc., about self-control, etc. So Pesach is the time when we are animal-like, we are baby-like, we're just starting out on our journey, we've just been plopped into the world, and here's where we start. And the goal is to get to Shavuot, to get to the anniversary of the receiving of the Torah, which is God's wisdom and guidance for life. It's the maturity, the adult-like way of living, the human way of living, whichever metaphor you wish to apply. So we have to go through some kind of journey between these two opposites. And how do we do it? And so this is what the counting of the Omer is all about, is we are given the tools of how to go through this journey. And so in Kabbalah, there's a lot of elaboration as to what these 7 weeks represent. And if you remember from Hebrew school, right, in the description of the creation of the world, we have the 7 days of creation. We have 6 days, and then on the 7th day God rests, the famous 7 week, the Shabbos, etc. So we all know about the number 7. We have 7 colors in the rainbow. So the number 7 comes up all the time, and the question is that just random, or does it have a significance? And in Kabbalah, there's a lot of elaboration that yes, it does have significance, because these 7 are actually 7 different soul powers that we have. And so I just wanted to record it, so I'm starting in recording. So these 7 soul powers that we have are divided into 2 groups. We have the 3 emotions and the 4 instincts. Okay, so it's actually 3. There's 3 emotions, 3 instincts, and then there's the sum total of it all. So what we're going to do is this week we're going to start talking about the 3 emotions, and if there's time, we're going to go on to talking about the instincts, and then next week we plan to finish up about the emotions until where we get to. We're going to be discussing the 3 intellectual faculties, which are not even included in the 7 days of the week or in the 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuot. And then the week after, we're going to start talking about the subconscious. So we're going to hopefully have a summary of the Kabbalistic vision of the psychology of the human being, of our personality, of our character, of our soul, and what makes us tick. And hopefully we'll have a better understanding as to what tools we have available to us to behave in certain ways in an appropriate way. So the first things we have to realize is the point of learning about ourselves is to then be able to apply that knowledge to grow and develop. But in order to do that, we have to have a mindset that we can change. Too many of us believe, whether consciously or unconsciously, that we're just set in our ways and it just is what it is, right? So there's the famous story of the turtle and the scorpion that were walking, that was by the side of the river. So the scorpion is going by the side of the river and wants to get across. He looks around for a bridge. There's no bridge. How's he going to get across? So he looks around and he sees there's a turtle about to swim across the river. So he says, my dear turtle, why don't you give me a ride? I'll jump on your back and you swim across and give me a ride. And the turtle turns to the scorpion and he says, are you crazy? Everybody knows who you are. All you do all day is sting other beings. And when you sting, then we die. So I'm not giving you a ride across the river. Imagine we're going to be in the middle of the river and you are going to zap me, and then I am going to get paralyzed. I won't be able to swim, and that's going to be the end of me. And so the scorpion says to the turtle, don't worry about it. I'm not going to sting you. He says, yes, you will. He says, I'll prove it to you. He says, if I'm on your back and I sting you and then you get paralyzed and you're not able to swim anymore, you're going to drown. Guess what's going to happen to me? I'm going to drown too. So that doesn't make any sense. There's no way I'm going to sting you when I'm getting a ride on your back. So the turtle thinks for a minute. He's convinced that he's safe. And he says, you know what, scorpion, get on my back. So the turtle starts swimming across the river, and the scorpion is on his back. And right in the middle of the river, the scorpion sticks out his stinger and zap right in the underbelly of the turtle. And the turtle's like, ah! He's screaming, what did you do? What did you do? I warned you about this, and now I'm going to get paralyzed. I'm going to drown. You're going to drown. It's over. Why did you do this? And the scorpion turns to the turtle and he said, my dear turtle, I'm a scorpion. That's what I do. And so when we're talking about an animal, right, as animals, as lovely as they are, and as depending which ones, right, some are dangerous, some are friendly, but they all have a common denominator, which is more or less they can't really grow out of their nature, because that's how they were programmed. An animal was programmed to a scorpion was programmed to do this, and a cow was programmed to do that, whatever animal it may be. But we, as human beings, we are different. And we were given the potential by God to actually transcend our nature, to transform ourselves, to grow, to become bigger and better, and to work on ourselves and to develop. Now, it doesn't mean that we're able to do everything. That some people think, they say, oh, you can do everything you set your mind to. You can do anything you set your mind to. Well, it's a nice idea, but if we really could do anything we set our mind to, we would be God. And God forbid that we should think we are God. So the point is to realize we can do a lot more than we think, but we shouldn't then fall into the trap of thinking that we are invincible and we are superhuman. So there's a balance somewhere in the middle. But the point is that now is the time between Passover and Shavuos to think about where we can develop, where we can grow, and what we can do better. But in order to figure out what we can do better, we need to understand ourselves a little better. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is our emotional makeup. And so I'm going to share with you a screen on Zoom, which hopefully you can see. And this will be a summary of what we have in the Kabbalistic idea of what is the makeup of a human being. I just want to see if you can get the whole screen. Okay. So as I mentioned, we have the 3 emotions, and then we have 3 instincts, and then we have the final summary of it all. So let's go through. I'm going to go through the names. You may have heard of these names and these ideas, and we'll see how we go. If you have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the comments on Facebook Live, or speak up on Zoom, or wave your hand so you can catch my attention, and we'll try and answer your questions. So here we go. So according to Kabbalah, these are 7 powers with which God created the world. That's why there are 7 days, because each day God generated a different energy, a different theme, if you will, to the universe. And if you actually look at the creation story in Bereshit and Genesis, there's actually, it's for another time to go into in detail, but each day is actually the same theme was created, expressed in a physical creation on that day as to what we're talking about. So the first day is Chesed, second day is Gevurah, the third day is Tiferes or Tiferet, the fourth day is Netzach, the fifth day is Hod, the sixth day is Yesod, and then we have Malchut. So I don't know if you can see on the screen over here. Okay, so we're just going to go 3. We're going to focus on the 3 emotional ones here. And then if there's time, we'll start talking about the instincts. Okay, so the first one is Chesed. Chesed means kindness. And that is because the first day is all about kindness. It's all about giving. Now, kindness is focusing on the action, whereas the word for the essence of the day is ahava, which means love. So it's pretty obvious to, if you think about it, that kindness is an expression of love, right? If you love, then you're going to express it with giving and sharing. And if you give, then it will affect the way you love. So let's talk a little bit about the love, etc. So here we go. Okay, so when you say love, it means all the kind of words that you're going to associate with it: attraction, closeness, love, connection, giving, generosity, etc. So I was once visiting a lady with one of my little girls. As a rabbi, I do a lot of home visits, and of course not under Corona, but under normal circumstances. And anyway, we had a meeting, but my little girl was there, and my little girl, for some reason, was very uncomfortable in the situation. She didn't like she didn't connect with this lady. You could see on her face that she was a little uncomfortable. So, but this lady was a very nice, friendly lady. She didn't want to just leave it at that this child came to her home and left, with this uncomfortable feeling. So she kept offering her different things. She offered her a cookie, she'd offer her some cake, she'd offer her a drink. And slowly, slowly, my daughter mellowed and she took the cake, and slowly a relationship developed. So what was interesting is that sometimes the love is there, and as an expression of love, one wishes to give, but sometimes as an expression of giving, the love comes second. So love is the feeling, giving is the action, and between the two, we have the package of the first day of creation, or the first week between Pesach and Shavuot, which is the focus on love. Now, the word love is, of course, worship today. That's, who doesn't think about love? We talk about love as the underpinning of a relationship. We talk about love as the meaning of life. People talk about God as the essence of love. Love is worshipped almost in today's society. But the thing is that you can actually have an imbalance of love. So let's start with the obvious. You can have not enough love. Some people are very loving and very generous and very giving, and they love having friends and having relationships. And some people can be more what we call an introvert, that they're not so loving and they're not so giving, and they don't want to hang out with people. They just kind of want to be to themselves. So the first area where we have to look is to assess ourselves. How loving am I on a scale of 1 to 10? Am I a very loving person? Am I a very giving person? Am I looking to make new friends? Am I outgoing and friendly, etc.? If I walk into a new room, if I walk into a room and I haven't met anybody there, am I going to go over to a table and introduce myself and make new friends? Or am I going to find a chair in the corner and not have anything to do with anybody, right? So that's going to be a scale of where we can assess ourselves on the love scale of how loving am I. So obviously there's different kinds of love. There's love, a one-on-one relationship, and then there's just a toned down kind of love where we just have a big circle of friends. And I'm not saying there's a right way of how to express our love, but the need to develop our loving capacity is there. For some of us, it comes naturally. For some of us, we need to work on it and develop it. In fact, the Torah says, "Va'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," that you should love your fellow as yourself. So we actually have a mitzvah, we have a commandment in the Torah to love your fellow, and it talks about in the Talmud that there's a directive, ukanei lecha chaver. You should acquire for yourself a friend. It's not enough just to say, oh, if I happen to get along with someone, then I'm good, and if I don't, I'm not. We actually have a directive, a guidance from the Torah and from the Talmud to make friends. And so, as I say, some people are very friendly and outgoing and loving, and they have a whole network of 500 friends, and some people only have 2 friends. But the point is that we need to make sure that we have developed the capacity for love and friendship, whether it's a relationship one-on-one or a circle of friends. So that is the most obvious area of where we have to ask ourselves, are we expressing love? But then we can have an overdevelopment of love. So think about if you have a loved one who has an addiction, whether it's gambling or alcohol or whatever it may be. Now, if I love that person and I'm generous and I want to give to that person, so if they come over to my house and ask me for a drink, sure, I want to share my drink with you. If they want to go to a party in Las Vegas, sure, let me buy you a ticket because I'm generous, I'm loving, I'm giving. But guess what? If I'm going to give a gambler, someone who's addicted to gambling, the opportunity to go gamble, I'm not actually helping them. I'm actually hurting them. If I'm going to give an alcoholic an access to alcohol, I'm not helping them. I'm actually hurting them. So I may be loving, I may be generous, I may be giving, but I'm actually hurting them. So when in this week, the first area where we focus on love, we have to ask ourselves, number one, am I loving? Do I need to develop more ability to love and to give and to share and to be generous? But if that's not the issue, I also need to ask myself, is my love always a healthy love? Do I give in a healthy way, or do I sometimes give in an unhealthy way to people or situations that would not benefit from it, and on the contrary, it might hurt them? This is a big one when it comes to child rearing, how to interact with our children. A child who is raised always getting whatever they ask for from their parents is not going to grow up to be a healthy child. We call that a spoiled child, right? Because the parents were so loving and so giving and never said no. The child doesn't learn the importance of hearing no and how to deal with that. So there's an example. In relationships, sometimes we have to say no. When we're dealing with someone who has an unhealthy addiction, we have to say no. So we have to, number one, have the ability to give and to share and to love. And number two, we have to ask ourselves, am I giving in the right way to the right person? And then there's another way that love can be misaligned, and that is where we start loving things more than loving people. God gave us the ability to love, which means to connect and a sense of attraction and closeness. But we can actually misalign that, or it can be in a misalignment where instead of channeling that love and connection and affection to another person or many people, we instead harness it to things. And we end up developing hobbies, which there's nothing wrong with hobbies, but we end up getting so obsessed with our hobbies that we have a relationship with things instead of with people. So I may have a train set, and I love trains to such an extent that the trains come before my relationship with other people. Now I've overdone that love and that connection and that closeness in a way that's become unhealthy because it's being harnessed into things when it's supposed to be for people. Some people, having a pet is fine, having a pet at home, but some people put the pet before the other person. There's the famous moral question that's asked: if you have your favorite dog that you've had for 10 years and you really, really love, and you see that dog drowning in the water, and then you see 100 yards down the river, you see a stranger that you've never met, a human being that you've never met drowning, who do you save first? You can't save them both at the same time. So you have to choose between a human being who's a stranger versus your pet dog that you have a relationship for 10 years. And so the correct answer is you have to save the stranger, because that's a human being, and a human being's life is greater than an animal's life. Notwithstanding the fact that an animal has value, and especially an animal that we have a relationship has value, but we have to be careful not to let that love that we have for the animal, for the dog, or whatever the pet, cloud our sense of commitment to our fellow human beings. So that's an example of how we can allow our love to get misaligned, whether it's loving a pet more than another human being, or whether it's loving things and putting the things before my relationships, whether it's my phone or my gadgets or my toys, whatever it may be. We all have our toys, right? And of course, I'm talking to myself. But the point is that we can let our love, if it goes uncontrolled, it can end up, that desperation for love and connection can end up landing in places that we didn't really want it to land. It just landed there because we let it come out of emotion as opposed to in a thoughtful way. And so what we're trying to do during these 7 weeks is to reevaluate and reassess each one of these 7. And we ask ourselves a few questions. Am I loving the right way? Am I loving the right things? Am I loving enough? So when I ask these kind of questions within my mind, I can actually do some some thought-provoking self-reflection and soul-searching in order to ensure that my love is going in the right direction and is in the right way and in a healthy way. And so this is a little bit of a summary about what we talk about on the first day, the first week of between Pesach and Shavuos. The first day of creation is all about love and giving, generosity, etc. And here's just a very quick hint. What was the creation on the first day? It was light. Okay, we're not going to go into the whole thing because it's a whole lecture for itself about the 7 days of creation. But just remember, light is an expression of love and kindness and generosity. Okay, so we're now going to go to the second emotion, and that is what we call Gevurah. Now, Gevurah means strength, okay? And when it comes to strength, what kind of strength are we talking about? So we're talking about the strength that it takes in order to withhold something. You know, the famous line that it takes more self-control to stop than it does to start. You know, if you're braking, you know, how hard you have to press on the brakes when you're driving a car and you want to drive, you just press on the accelerator, right? And you start driving. But if you want to brake, especially a hard brake, ooh, now it's going to be a whole different story. And the heavier the truck or the vehicle, the more harder you're going to have to press on the brake, and the harder the brakes have to work. To stop is if you've ever been on a plane and you come into land, right? And the amount of tension that there is with the flaps on the wings holding up the plane, and the screeching of the brakes, the tension, and to try and hold the plane back to stop. So it takes a lot of strength to stop. So the second emotion is all about stopping. It's all about withdrawing. It's all about withholding. And that is because that is the action expression of the emotion of the second emotion, which is yirah, which is fear. So we have love as the first emotion, which expresses itself in an action of giving and generosity. We have the second day and the second emotion, which is fear. And as an expression of fear, what action do you create out of fear? You create rejection. You stop. Borders, boundaries, etc. So some of the words that come out of the Gevurah, the strength to stop, is fear, criticism, sadness, rejection, etc. So when it comes to the second emotion, think of it this way: when you're fearful, right, you hoard. Right, we've just seen this now with Corona. Right, as soon as there was a fear of a shortage of resources, all of a sudden people start gathering those resources. All of a sudden there's a shortage of this and a shortage of that, and people start hoarding. People stop giving. People stop sharing. People naturally hoard and withhold, because when we're feeling love creates generosity of spirit. We want to share, we want to give, we want to share that experience with you. Fear is about self-protection. If I sense that my life is in danger, if I sense that something is going wrong, out of self-protection, I'm like, 1 second, hold on a second, stop. This is not working out. We need to reassess. We need to reevaluate. Is it a good idea for me to be giving away this toilet paper right now, or should I be holding it back for myself? Is it a good idea for me to be now buying this new product that I was on my to buy list, or should I be holding back reserves in the bank? So this duality on the second emotion is fear creates withdrawal. Fear creates holding back. So some examples of what happens out of fear is we want to gather resources, we want to protect ourselves, we want to put up big fences, we want to make sure the alarm system is working in our house, we want to buy life insurance or any kind of insurance, we want to make sure we have savings. All of this are actions, but they're all in the category of withholding, of protecting, of self-preservation. So whereas on the first emotion, it's all about love and connection and sharing and giving, when you're loving, you're not thinking about, oh, if I give to you, then there's less for me, because love just wants to give and wants to share. But when I fear, then all of a sudden, I start asking myself, 1 second, is there enough for me? If I'm going to give to you, is there going to be enough left over for me? And so one of the examples we see that Yitzchak, Isaac, one of our patriarchs, was famous for digging wells. And so the Kabbalah tells us that Isaac was actually an expression of yirah, of this fear, because he spent his time digging wells. What's digging wells? Making sure you have a water source. Today, we turn on the faucet and you have water, no big deal. Back in ancient times, when you didn't have plumbing, it was very important. If you were in a settlement, if you were in a town, you had to have a water source. That was like, the most important thing. So he didn't just suffice himself to have one water source, one well. He actually dug multiple wells. He was constantly on the lookout for that security that comes with having a water source. So think of security, rejection, boundaries, borders. All of this is in the theme of Gevurah, of fear, which expresses itself in self-protection and inaction even. Okay, so let's first talk about the underdeveloped. Now, very often, people who are high in love are low in fear. So oftentimes you'll have the spontaneous, loving kind of person that will forget to lock the door or set the alarm at night because they're just not thinking about the fear of what could go wrong. They're just spontaneously sharing and enjoying and giving. So the first thing we need to think about is the second emotion of fear. Fear gets a bad rap. FDR said, fear, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And in our culture today, as much as love is worshipped, fear is denigrated. But the truth is that fear is a very, very important emotion that God gave us as a tool to protect ourselves. Think about what would have happened in the 2008 financial crisis if a few years before that, all of the pessimists in the banks who were saying this is not a good idea for us to be investing and overextending ourselves to such a degree and making all these loans in such a degree, et cetera, all these things could go wrong. Slow it down a little bit. Imagine what kind of danger could have been averted and what kind of disaster. Even now, right? With coronavirus, right? If we would have more people thinking about fear in our governments, in our leadership, then guess what? We would have minimized some of the tragedy that we're experiencing right now. So fear is actually a very important tool and emotion that God gave us in order to protect ourselves. If we wouldn't fear, we wouldn't lock our doors at night. We wouldn't save for a rainy day fund. We wouldn't build walls. The Torah says that if you have a house with a flat roof, that you have to build a fence around it. It's the famous mitzvah of ma'akeh, of building a fence around your roof, because someone may go up there and then fall down. So the Torah is concerned about protecting life, about being responsible. So we have to be careful not to let fear take control of us. We can't let fear dictate to us how to live our life. But at the same time, we need to access the fear ability in order to help us to protect ourselves for the possible dangers that may be coming down the road. So the first question we have to ask ourselves when we're focusing on fear is, am I fearful enough? Am I conscientious? Am I concerned? Do I lock my doors at night? Am I careful? Right? Be careful. It's important. But the flip side is that we can be overly fearful. When we're overly fearful, then nothing is ever good enough, right? So, the famous question is the cup half full or is it half empty? So the healthy balance is to say that, the loving person is focusing on the fact that the cup has got water in it. The fearful person is focusing on the fact that the cup is not full. The realistic person, it just says, oh yeah, it's got some water in it and some not. So you have to know how to use both. But if somebody is overly fearful, it tends to express itself in being overly critical. Nothing's ever good enough. It can lead to depression. It can lead to sadness. It can lead to anxiety. It can lead to just general pain, because one looks at the world through negative lenses. And when we look at the world through negative lenses, everything seems negative. If you put on blue shades, then everything you're going to look at is going to have a blue tinge to it. If you put on red shades, then everything you're going to look at is going to have a red shade. So fear is an important tool, but we can't let it control us to then express itself that we're always looking for things to be negative about. They talk about the missing tile syndrome when you walk into a room and there's a beautiful mosaic on the ceiling full of beautiful tiles, and there's one tile missing, right? So you're going to go and notice that one tile, because we have a tendency to notice what's missing, to notice what's wrong. But we have to be careful not to get too critical and too anxious that everything is going wrong and everything is a problem. So we have to develop our ability to fear, which should then lead us to a healthy action of saving for a rainy day, not using up all our resources, in taking out a life insurance, taking out a car insurance, whatever it may be, saving, the concept of saving, protecting, making sure to lock our doors at night, making sure to have a fence, etc., etc. All these things, the action of fear is important things to protect us and our loved ones. But at the same time, we can't let it go overboard where that fear controls us. We have to have a healthy balance between love and fear. And if we get too fearful, too focused on the negative, then we end up getting very critical, bitter, resentful, because we have to, as human beings, we have to have lots of things to be grateful for. And we all have lots of things to be grateful for. But if we're going to focus on all the things that are not the way they're supposed to be and not good enough, then we're going to build up a lot of resentment, a lot of hate, a lot of criticism in ourselves, which will not turn out to be healthy. So number one, to develop a healthy sense of, to develop the emotion of fear, but number two, to make sure it's not misaligned where we end up becoming critical of ourselves, critical of others, and not seeing the glass as half full. So the Torah also talks about not hating other people, because we're not supposed to hate, right? So if someone does something wrong to us, we can confront them and say, hey, why did you do that to me? But to then let it turn into hate and anger is inappropriate. Okay, moving along, we're going to go now to the third emotion. And the third emotion is actually a blend of these two. So the third emotion is what we call Tiferes. Now, Tiferes means beauty, or in the action, it would be to beautify. Okay, and that is because just like in the other three, right? In the other two, we said Chesed is kindness. That's the action as an expression of love. And Gevurah is strength, which is to resist, the strength to withhold and resist as an expression of fear. So now the third emotion is, the action of the emotion is to beautify. And that is an expression of caring. So the third emotion is caring. How much do you care? Okay, and by the way, Chesed, love, is expressed in the right hand because that's the hand we use to give a hug, to share. Gevurah is used in the left hand, which is the hand that we use to protect. If somebody's going to throw something at us, we're going to pick up our left hand to protect ourselves. If you're the defensive position in boxing or it's fighting is to have the left hand there to block, and then so. The third emotion is caring, which is a blend of love and fear. When do we care? We care when we love someone, but we also fear that something's going to go wrong. And when you blend those two together, you care for the other person. When you care for the other person, it expresses itself in wanting to help them, wanting to heal them, wanting to fix them, wanting to beautify. And so the third emotion and action is caring, which expresses itself in beautifying and fixing. So think of when we said that love expresses itself as giving, and fear expresses itself as protecting and withholding, caring expresses itself as healing. So a doctor or a nurse who is healing a person, that is coming out of a profound sense of care. It's not just love, because love, when you love, you give. It's not fear, because when you fear, you withhold. Caring is a very interesting blend of the two. When you blend love and fear together, you end up with a new emotion called caring. And the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, how much do you care, right? Some people just don't care. Right? They may love, but they don't care. The capacity to really be bothered about whether something is working out, or whether we have that relationship that we wanted, or whether we get that job. How much do you actually care? Now, obviously, the closer things are to us, the more we care about them. It could be caring about things. It could be caring about people. But the first question we have to ask ourselves is, how much do we care? Do we have the capacity to really care about something? Or are we cold like a fish? Are we indifferent? Some people are just indifferent. They just don't care. And so the first question we have to ask ourselves is, do we care? Now, the problem is that there can be a misalignment of caring as well. Because guess what? Some people care so much. Robin Hood cared so much about the poor that he stole from the rich in order to give to the poor. So that's great that he cared for the poor, but he let that care for the poor express itself in an unhealthy way, where he's stealing from one person to give to the other. Stealing is forbidden. So caring, it doesn't always come out in the right way. So we have to be careful that the caring should, A, we should care, but B, it shouldn't get misaligned. The other problem is when we care so much about a situation, but we don't feel we can do anything about it, then that can lead to a sense of helplessness and depression. So if we don't care about the situation, then we're not going to feel upset about the fact that it didn't work out. So there's not such a concern. But if we care deeply about a situation and then it doesn't work out, that can lead to sadness and depression. So we have to be careful not to let our caring turn into something negative where we feel helpless to do anything about it. They say, what's the difference between ignorance and apathy? I don't know, and I don't care. But so we need to know the things that we care about, and we need to know that it's appropriate to care. And when we care, we fix, right? If there's something broken in your house, if you don't care, you're not going to fix it. But if you care, you're going to fix it. If you don't know how to fix it, you're going to get somebody else to fix it. If you care about yourself, you care about your body, you care about the way you look, you're going to do something about it. You're going to exercise, you're going to eat right, you're going to work on making yourself as good looking as you possibly could be. Why? Because you care about how you look. If you don't care about how you look, then you don't work out, you don't do exercise, you don't put on makeup, whatever it may be that you want to do to make yourself look better, to make yourself nicer, better, and whatever it may be. If somebody wants to be healthy, if you care about your life and you want to be healthy, then you're going to become healthy. If you don't care about it, then you won't be. So caring expresses itself in all of these things, where it expresses itself in fixing, beautifying, etc. So we've summarized or kind of given an introduction to the three staple emotions that we all have. There's the emotion of love, which expresses itself in giving. There's the emotion of fear, which expresses itself in withholding and protecting. And there's the emotion of caring, which expresses itself in beautifying, fixing, healing, which is the middle part of us. That's the heart itself, where is the capacity to care, the actual emotion, the feeling of caring. So with that, we're going to wrap up tonight's presentation. I hope that it was helpful. If you have any questions, we have just a minute or so to answer any questions you may have. You can also email me or text me with any questions you may have, and we will and I will respond. If there's no questions, we'll wrap it up here. And one
quick question.
Yes, please.
Sorry. There's a lot of really good information, and was wondering if we can access the recorded session of this.
So I did record most of it. I forgot to start the recording at the beginning, but I did record most of it. And absolutely, I will make it available on the mailing list and on Facebook so that you could review it. Absolutely. So we're planning to do next week on Wednesday night, same time, same place, where we're going to do the second part, which is going to be focusing on our instincts, which is the bottom four of the seven emotions and instincts, as we mentioned. So thank you so much for joining, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, bye.